Hi, in this Affinity designer tutorial video, I'm going to show you how to make this camera clip art image. One of the great things about Affinity Designer is that it's possible to make simple artwork like this that looks like what it's supposed to be, but even if you're not an artist, you can create something like this. This is primarily created out of shapes with a few little effects and styles thrown in. So I'm going to show you how I made this in this video. Alright, so I've opened up another document, and let's just start with the body of the camera. So I'm going to use a rounded rectangle shape over from this left toolbar. Click on that, pick an area on your artboard, hold the left mouse key, and just drag out. So let's do a couple quick things here. I don't really want to stroke on it at this point. I'm just drawing shapes. I'll decide where I want to stroke later. So I'm going to remove the stroke just by clicking on this stroke box and clicking the white circle with the red line through it. And then on the fill, let's go ahead and change that to black. So I'm going to click on this square here, switch it to swatches, and from there, I've got a few common colors, black, white, and gray, as well as more options here, but I'm just going to choose black here. Now, this is probably just a little bit too rounded, so I can either grab this little red dot here and just pull, or I can go up to my corner options. This is the drop down that tells me it's a rounded corner, and this tells me what percent. And in my original one, I think I had about 10% or so, but let's maybe make it about like that. Now the next thing I need is my little kind of silver area here that is the top part of the camera. So what I'm going to do to make it nice and easy to have the same size is I'm going to select this rounded rectangle that I already made, and copy, Control C, and paste, and you can see in my layers that that created a duplicate of this. Now I can take this handle at the bottom and just drag it up. Now that messed up the corners on this, so what I want to do is I want to go up here where it says single radius and uncheck this box. Now each of my four corners is its own option. Whereas when this is checked, it affects all the corners at the same time, simultaneously and at the same amount. But now I can take each of these corners and adjust it. So on the top left, I want to grab this little handle here. And let's do one quick thing here. Let's change the color of this. So I'm going to go to the fill color. Let's just make it already kind of a gray color. And the reason I'm doing that is when I'm working on this top left corner, I want to see where the black is underneath it and then match it. So it looks like right around there. So I also want to change the top right corner, so I'll click on that drop down and bring that down till I see the black, and then kind of scale it back a little bit again. And then these bottom corners I don't want to be rounded, so the bottom left, I'm going to use this drop down here to say none. That makes it a square corner. And same thing on the bottom right. So now we have our basic camera body. Let's take a look at the next things we want. So we will want to have a circle here in the middle for the lens, and I will want another rounded rectangle here for the viewfinder, and another one here for the little dial or push button, whatever we want to say that that is. So let's take a circle shape over here on the ellipse tool, and we'll just draw out a circle. And I'm just placing this kind of just where I think it should go. I'm not going to get into detail of the lens until just a little bit later. The next thing I want is another rounded rectangle, so switch to the rounded rectangle, draw out your little shape, and let's make this a contrasting color. So it's selected, go up to fill, switch it to swatches, and change it to black. And then finally, I'm going to do another rounded rectangle up here as my little dial. I can make that silver, I can make that black, it doesn't really matter. Like I said, we're just kind of sketching things out at the moment. So now we have this area up here, which is I'm not sure what to call it, but I've got this little reference here that I screenshotted from the web of some other clip art. And that was kind of my inspiration for how I was going to design my own camera. You'll see that my camera doesn't really look like any of these specifically, but it's kind of an amalgamation of all these different images, kind of taking the things I liked from certain ones and the things I didn't like, I left alone. So let's go ahead and make this top part here. And if I click on this, you'll see that in my layers it's a curve, and that's because what I did is I took a trapezoid and just modified it a bit. So we've got a whole bunch of other shapes hidden under this fourth shape tool. You'll see the little white triangle in the corner. I'm going to click on that, and let's pick the trapezoid. And so I'm just going to make that a little bit off my camera at the moment because I am going to make some adjustments. So I'm going to grab this handle and this one and just drag them out to make my trapezoid a little bit longer along the top edge of it. And so now what I want to do is convert this to curve. So that's a button right up here when you're on one of your shape tools, and that will switch it from being a shape to being a path. And once I have done that, I can go into my node tool and I can edit this. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see a little bit better what I am doing here. So going back to my reference here, you'll see that it's just a little bit rounded on top here. And when I go to the node tool here, you'll see that I've got 2 square nodes and 2 round ones. And that's how I created that slightly rounded effect. So I clicked on this top square node, and under convert here, I just converted it to smooth. And then I'm going to click on this one as well and convert to smooth. Now I can grab this handle and just kind of flatten it out. Grab this side, just flatten it out a little bit. And I think that's close enough. This is clip art. It doesn't need to be like perfect illustration. This is giving the indication of what it is. It's not like an exact replica. So let's go ahead and center that. I do have my snapping tool on, so you'll note when I'm sliding this around, I get little guidelines popping up telling me when I am centered. All right, so next we're going to add in some more detail to our lens. So let's look at the original here and take a look at what's going on. So this lens is actually made of 3 different components. We've got this bottom shape, and I will just turn off the others so we can see that. So I've got this bottom silver shape, and it's got a fill and no stroke, but it also does have some effects. We'll get back to that at the end here. And then the next layer on top of that is a white ellipse, which has a fill and a stroke. And then the layer on top of that is just this little segment of a circle, which is kind of indicating a bit of the glare on this. Okay, so let's go ahead and recreate that. So I've already got my silver circle here. I'm going to copy and paste so that I get a duplicate of that. And then let's go ahead and switch that to white. So same thing we did before. We're going to go into the fill. I'm just going to pick white. And then I'm going to, in my transform window here, lock the proportions of this so that I can just make it a little bit smaller. Like that. I seem to have lost my proportionality, but that looks okay. And so this one did have a stroke on it, so I'm going to go into the stroke I'm going to pick a gray, and then in my stroke width, we will turn that up. I believe it was 2.3 or so. Okay. And then our final shape that we need to create is this little bit of a segment here that kind of represents the glare. So I'm going to go back into this bottom shape tool, click on the little white triangle, and let's go ahead and use the, I think we'll use the donut tool. It doesn't really matter between the donut tool and the, I think it was the other one was the Crescent tool? No, the pie tool. Pie tool is the other one you can do. So let's get rid of the whole radius. And then I'm also going to adjust the start and end angles of this. So I'm going to just mess with this slider until I get about 1/3 to 1/4 of a circle here. And so now I can actually just leave the end angle alone and just grab this rotation thing and just spin that around. Go to the move tool and just drag this into position. Now probably a better thing would have been to duplicate this lens so that it has the exact same curvature to it, but we can just kind of scale this in and out with the handles a little bit so that it looks a little better. Okay, so now we have the basics of our camera. Let's go ahead and add some silver to it. So let's analyze what we've got here. We've got the ellipse here, which let me turn that back on, and we'll turn off the bottoms there. And this has got a silver style on it. And those are inbuilt into Designer. And then it also has a little bit of a bevel and emboss here. So let's go back over to ours here, and I'm going to just turn off the other parts of the lens so that we can just work on this. Now if you don't see the styles, go to View, Studio, and Styles. And let's do the aluminum one. I'll have to say I'm not super enamored of a lot of the styles that come with Designer. They're a little bit kind of hokey, but the aluminum one is not too bad. So we'll go to the aluminum one. You'll see that puts a little FX on our layer here, telling us that something's going on there. And I would say that this is pretty good the way it is. I'm just going to take the radius down a little bit, and it just kind of makes this outer kind of raised look a little bit lessened. And other than that, I don't really think I need to do too much. So now I can pick on this other silver part, and I can also add that same style. And again, I'm going to take the radius down a little bit so that it looks a little bit more natural. And then if I wanted to, I could do the same thing with this little dial here. So let's go ahead and do that. And again, just take the radius down so you get rid of the worst of that kind of raised look to it. All right, so there's my 3 elements that need to be kind of silver. You'll note that this shape here, besides that silver fill, I put a little stroke back onto it just to make it a little bit more noticeable. And so if we go back to this one, you know, this looks okay, but if we put a stroke on it, it'll just make it a little bit more distinct. So I'm just going to put a black stroke on it and leave it at 0.2 points. That just puts a very light outline on it. All right, so next let's go to our little white ellipse here. Go back over here and click on this one. So the effects that we have on this one is we just have a little bit of an inner glow. So let's turn this back on. And what that does, if I turn the inner glow off, you'll see that my stroke looks more on the outside of it, and by turning it on, it kind of softened it and moved it inwards a little bit, which gives a little bit of an illusion of depth. So you'll see this gray stroke that I've got right now. Let's turn on the inner glow, and then we can just kind of mess with the radius and the intensity. And you can see how that kind of just lightens it up and makes it just look a little bit more lens-like. Gives it a little bit of depth to it. And a lot of this is just kind of knowing what you want it to sort of look like and just playing with the controls and visually watching what happens. It's really nice in Designer that you can see things happening live as you do them. All right, so there's our lens, and then we will turn this on, and let's go back to our reference again. Turn this one back on as well. This one I can even tell looking at the thumbnail here that we've got a little bit of a glow on it, but let's click on the FX button and we can see what's going on here. So we've got an outer glow happening and a bit of an inner glow. So let's go ahead and add that to this. So we are going to turn on the inner glow, turn up the radius a fair bit, and also an outer glow, and turn up the radius a fair bit on that. And let's just take a look at the color here, because we have lost our color here. All right, so this one I had a gray stroke and no fill. So let's go back to this one. Gray stroke, and let's get rid of the fill here. Okay, so we're going to turn the radius down just a little bit so that our gray shows up again. And then let's add the outer glow back on. And then we'll just turn the radius up on that a little bit as well, making sure that this is selected as we do that. And again, it's just really a matter of messing with things until it does what you like. So there may be a little bit of back and forth or so between the inner and the outer glow. So let's just give a little bit more, and that softened it up a little bit, and now it looks a little bit more natural. Okay. All right, so the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give it just a little bit more three-dimensional look by adding this glow here. So let's analyze what this glow is. This is actually a crescent or moon shaped, and it's got some effects on it. It's got a Gaussian blur, and it's got an inner glow to it. All right, so let's go ahead and create our crescents then. That's also found under this extra shape tool here, crescent tool. And we will make our crescent, maybe squish it up just a little bit. And I'm going to take the stroke off of that and just put a fill on there. This time I'm just going to go with a gray that's a little bit lighter. So let's go in our colors, in our swatches. What happened to my grays? There they are. Switch to the grays, and we'll just make this a really light gray. So we'll go with something like 25% or so. You could even go less than that, 20, 15. And let's, forgot to switch to the move tool there. Let's go ahead and place this and put it at a little bit of a curvature, and then we can kind of adjust the size a little bit. And position it where we want it. Now let's go ahead and add our effects. So I've got this crescent layer selected. I'm going to go down to the bottom of my layers. Let's actually close out the styles a moment so we don't get confused. Right here there's a little word FX. That's a quick way to bring up your effects box. And we're going to take a Gaussian blur. And we're just going to pull that way up until it becomes more of a glow just by blurring it, because you're taking away those edges. And then we'll put just a little bit of a glow on it as well. So select it to turn it on, and then you can just adjust from here to just see what looks good. And actually I think very light radius on that. And we can also, if we want this to be less visible, turn down the layer opacity on it so that it becomes a little bit more transparent. So I think that looks pretty good. Now that I've got it, I'm going to Control C to copy, Control V to paste. That means that it's going to look exactly the same on the other side. And I'm going to go up to these little controls here and flip this horizontally, and then I can hold Shift and drag it out to my opposite corner here. And that makes it kind of a perfect reflection of the other side. And by holding Shift, I can drag it in a straight line. All right, so there is our camera graphic. And, this took about 20 minutes explaining it. It could take you much less time if you are just doing this from scratch without having to stop and explain every single step and why you're doing it. So this is really easy and quick to create, and it means that you can create your own your own original graphics to use in things just by analyzing what shapes something is composed of and adding a few effects here and there. You can make a lot of art even if you don't have an artistic bone in your body. You just need to be able to kind of see and think in terms of shapes and lines. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope to do more of these sorts of tutorials where I'm showing you how to make specific things. So if you have anything you want to see made, something that's reasonable, drop it in the comments and I'll see what I can do.